Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Making Sense of It All with Jesse Stakes. So, my guest this week actually lives my title of my podcast. I think Dennis has made sense of everything he's done in his life. My guest is Dennis Balonze. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I think we'll probably touch base on kind of everything that you have done through your career. But one of the biggest things that really struck a chord with me, and when we were having our initial conversation, and one of the things that I really felt like you could relate to my audience and a lot of people out there is that you really turned your profession into into essentially an investment for your whole life. And
Pretty much.
I thought that was a fantastic story. So I mean, if you would, tell my audience, we can dive into every, more details, but just kind of high level, tell them a little bit about your story and what you like, how you kind of took your profession and turned it into something that's just, allowed you to live the life that you want to live.
So I guess we'll go back 30 years. Um, 30
Fair to
years.
say.
Yeah, 30 years. So I started out as a small business owner when I was 23 years old. I started a barber shop in Montclair, New Jersey. And I was, just starting out, didn't know much, living home. And it was probably like the best thing that ever happened to me because I was able to see my future when I took over that business. It was an existing business of 80 years.
Okay.
So I had a built-in clientele already, and it was a plug and play. You just hop in and start, doing your thing. So it made me visualize now what my future is going to be.
Hmm.
So I was at a crossroads of what I want to do. Do I want to become a multi-unit barbershop owner, or do I want to become a multi-unit real estate owner, like having multiple doors and properties all over?
And you
And
were already thinking about that at 23.
I was thinking at 23, yeah,
So was it like,
because
out of curiosity, was it like somebody else who kind of put that thought in your head, like like somebody who was an inspiration to you, or was it that was just where you, like at that young age you were already thinking that real estate was where you wanted to invest your money?
okay, so if you want to go back further, my uncle was a barber,
Okay.
and he employed me at 12 years old, sweeping the floor.
Okay.
And his business model was, he came over from, Europe, and that was his trade, and that's all he knew. And his business model was to cut hair and buy real estate. So when I was sweeping the floor, I was watching this and seeing what he was doing. And there was days when he would send me to go collect rent from his tenants, and I was
Nice.
seeing all this cash that he was taking back to the barbershop. That kind of rubbed off on me. So when it became time for me to own my barbershop, I kind of liked that business model. So, so I was just when I took over that business, I was thinking about the exit. What is my exit strategy? Where am I going to go with this? Am I just going to be a
Yes.
barber? Because that's what barbers usually do. They'll just barber until they're 70, until they can't do it no more. And I was
Right.
young at the time, so I didn't want to do that. So so I was thinking about the end in sight, and I chose real estate because it allowed me to keep doing what I was doing because I had to be at the shop and make sure everyone was satisfied, and it allowed me to just have that run in the background while I was doing what I was doing. So I like that model. So chose real estate. That's what I
Okay.
chose.
And any type of real estate, like did you have like when you were like was it residential real estate, commercial real estate, certain, was there any thought on that as far, or was it just kind of whatever was a good buy?
So at that time, my funds were very limited on what I could invest in. So I was looking for the lowest hanging fruit, and that was residential real estate.
Okay.
So my first purchase, within like the first 6 months of being in business, was my first money I saved, and I wound up buying a two-family house in New Jersey.
Okay. So like a
Wow.
duplex.
Yeah, so while I was living home, I bought a two-family. I put 10% down. It was like 20 grand, and rented it out, and I managed it, and I just made sure that it was collecting rent and stuff, and that's how I started.
Very cool.
So
And so go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, so that first purchase was probably my worst purchase. but it was the most informal purchase I made. That's how I learned everything I know now, probably. Learned a lot from that one.
I think we all learned a lot from, what we would consider mistakes versus if you were just to have instant success with the first duplex you bought, you'd have probably bought nothing but duplexes for a while.
Exactly. So, I guess the biggest takeaway from that would be if you're just getting into real estate, or it's probably my biggest thing was like, okay, I had limited funds. So I always thought of the investment from, my perspective. I didn't think of it from the tenant's perspective much. Because I had a limited budget, it forced me into a certain price range. It forced me not on the most desirable property for a tenant. It was desirable for me because the numbers worked. The
Right.
gross rent minus my expenses, I was making money. But I never accounted for size of the bedrooms. Will the bedrooms fit a king size bed? That was important to a tenant. I didn't know that. Um, it was a one-way street and it had very limited parking. They didn't like that. We had shared
Right.
driveways. We had shared driveways, so there was no off-street parking. They didn't really consider that one. No closet space. Tenants want closets. Got to store their clothes. I didn't account for that. So it wasn't the most desirable rental property, but that made me learn for my next purchase what to look for.
Right.
So those little nuances that you pick up on could save you a ton of time, you know?
No doubt. Well, and I'm sure someone like there may be somebody who's listening to this who's kind of in the spot where they wanted to get started, but some of those things may not have been places where their mind went either. But listening to you and hearing you describe what the hard learnings that you had, maybe it makes them make one less mistake than what they would just thinking on their own. So I think that's fantastic.
Exactly. That's why I
So what
like these podcasts because you're able to pick up on those little details that help you, on your adventure in the future.
100%. No, I think it's fantastic, and I love. I mean, that's one of my favorite things that I've done with this podcast is I get to hear other people's stories. Get to hear people like yourself where you're telling your story, and it gives my audience a conversation that they get to have a peek into that they probably wouldn't. Maybe they don't even think to they don't know you, they don't have the opportunity to meet you, but now they get to hear your story. They get to hear your trials and errors, your successes, and it's maybe it inspires them, or it's something that they already thought about, but it's something that gives them that um the, like you said, just that one thing where they didn't think about it and now it's in their mind, and so they make a better decision on whatever choice they were going to make. So no, I think I feel the same way. I think it's fantastic.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you get past your first duplex, and you had all of these kind of things that you learned. What was the second investment? Did you feel like it was a quote unquote better investment, smarter investment at that time?
Yeah. So this was early 2002. So the market was going up in my favor, luckily.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. So in '05, it basically doubled in value without even doing anything to it, just because of the market was going up. So that was my opportunity. I saw it as a liquidity event.
Yes.
So I saw that as an opportunity to sell it. I learned how to do a 1031 exchange.
Hmm.
For those of you who don't know what a 1031, it's tax deferred strategy when selling real estate. You could take the profits, tax deferred, and buy a like kind property within a certain amount of time period. So I did that move. And probably my biggest thing that I did was when I was figuring out what I wanted to get and where, I wanted to know where jobs were going. Because I didn't have a huge amount of pool of tenants wanting the property. But if I knew there were jobs around, I would then have a better, more tenants wanting to come look at the property.
Yes.
So I read a book a long time ago, and I remembered this phrase, and I still remember it till today, and I still follow it. It says, "Live where you want to live, invest where it makes sense." So that was my
That's
approach.
smart.
That was my approach. Where I was in New Jersey, It was very expensive, and my money couldn't go really that far. I want to scale out and leverage more. And I remember this other thing he wrote in the book was this: if you have $100,000 and you buy $100,000 property, you're worth 100,000. But if you take that same $100,000 and you buy 10 properties with 10,000 down, you're now worth 1 million. And not only are you worth it, but you also are leveraging and controlling that amount of real estate. So that stuck with me as well. So, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. Um, so what I did was I went out of state. I went to Alabama because at the northern Alabama, because this was the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing, like the top five fastest growing in the country for job growth. And I kind of like the affordability. You could buy single family homes at that time for like 50, 60,000, which was great. 3 bedrooms, nice backyards, had everything that I didn't have in that first property: off-street parking, nice sized bedrooms, closet space, everything a homeowner would want for small amount of money. 50, 60,000 was my sweet spot. So with 10,000 with 10% down, that's only like 5 grand. So your money can go a long way there. And at the time, lending was kind of easy. If you had good credit, banks were willing to lend you. So I took advantage of the situation.
You at that point in time you could do stated income, stated assets.
Exactly.
You didn't even have to prove a thing other than, like you said, credit pull, and as long as you were above a 6 or a 730, you were golden.
Exactly. So I kind of had, I was in the right place at the right time. So I took advantage of the situation. Hired a realtor and I said, let's drive around and I want you to find me any $60,000 house. I'm interested in it. Because at that time too, the inventory was kind of tight as well because, you had a lot of investors buying up stuff.
Yes.
So we drove around and I was just picking off properties and putting them under contract and putting 5,000 down, going to the bank, showing them, hey, I got these homes here. They said no problem. They were actually adding on more to the loan. They were asking me if I had any repairs to make or if I had any AC repairs. I'm like, yeah, I had a couple thousand for repairs. Why not?
Right.
And then so I just locked them up that way, and that's how I took it to the next level.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah,
fast forward a little bit. Like when you say the next level, what do you mean by that?
so I was able to scale it from 2 doors to like 20 doors
Nice.
very quickly. So
All single family residences, all duplexes, or have you
there
ever
were
done any type of multifamily stuff as well, as far as like
yeah.
apartment buildings?
Yeah, earlier, as I was investing, I was focusing on the single families as I was getting more comfortable with everything. Started getting into the fourplexes and stuff.
There's
So yeah.
a lot less risk when you're talking about single family residences as far as an investment versus when you start adding doors to that single investment, it starts to become a little bit bigger nut to crack.
Yeah, so depending on where you are. So you're saying that less risk for single family home? Is that what you said?
Yes, I did. Just as
Yeah.
far as and I'm selfishly, I'm looking at it from a lending perspective. Like, I mean, that's when you look at it as far as the risk that you put into a single investor. When you have to fill, when you have to worry about consider vacancy rates on multifamily versus somebody who's single family residences are typically easier to turn or easier to put somebody in there.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. That's probably why I focused on single family in the beginning because lending was easy and that's how lenders viewed us
Yeah.
or viewed the investment as safe. But I can say that it's very safe for the investor if you are in a job growth area.
Hmm.
If you're not in a job growth area, you're going to really suffer because
Right.
you're not going to have the pool of tenants that you need to fill in the vacancy. And how long are they going to stay there for? If you're in an area where jobs are growing, I find that the tenants stay there longer and value the property more than the opposite. If there's no jobs, then like I invested in areas where there was no job growth, and I was getting tenants like, "Oh, I'm building a house. It's going to take me a year. I'm going to stay here for a year, and then they're going to leave." And then where's my next tenant going to come from?
Right.
You know, where if it was job growth, okay, I got all these jobs coming from everywhere. There's a lot of demand. You got part-timers, you got seasonal ones or full-time ones. So you got more of a pool of tenants to choose from. So I think job growth should be your number one criteria when wanting to choose single family or multi as well, but more so single family.
I think it's a fantastic point, and I think a lot of people, when they, especially if they do something else, if they're trying to take their career and turn it into an investment, as you have, I don't think that
Mhm.
they think about those things. I don't think they
Yeah,
think about, as far as, and maybe in today's world it's a little bit different because there's so much information out there. I mean, my God, you can type it into Chat GPT or into one of these AI search engines, and they could probably spit you back a lot of different bullet points that you wouldn't think about. And especially, and back then you didn't have that so much,
right.
but it's a and in today's world, maybe some of that stuff is at your fingertips, but it didn't used to be. So
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic.
Hmm.
One of the things I wanted to talk about too is I thought, you had shared it with me, but I thought you really turned your previous profession or what you did when you started your life into something really cool now. Can you tell my audience a little bit about your show, your podcast that you do, and
Oh,
and kind of how you started that?
yeah. So, I realized, over the 20 years of me cutting hair, um, the conversations I had were amazing. The people I meet are amazing. I love what I do. I've learned so much from my customers, and a lot of things and a lot of stuff I have in my life now are um, inspired from my customers.
Yes.
So for that reason, I wanted to start publicizing what we're talking about in the barbershop. And it doesn't have to be about a particular niche or whatever. It's whatever my client has to say. I want to show it off. So I started a podcast on YouTube called Barber Up. Barber UPP. It's one word. You can see it on YouTube. And it's just casual conversation as if I'm just cutting their hair and we just forget that the microphone is there.
Yeah.
And we just talk about what my biggest question is what do you do and why you do what you do?
Yes.
That's how I
My
started off.
my favorite question.
Yeah, what do you do and why do you do what you do? And then so my topics are like all over. One's about health, yesterday we just filmed an Italian immigrant who came 3 generations ago and he just spoke about how he came to New York from Italy and
Yeah.
his ancestors and what they went through and what adversities they had and how they overcame them. So that was a good one.
Mhm.
One was an investor out of Miami. He owns many commercial units, retail units up and down Florida. So I had a great conversation with him while I was cutting his hair. So I got him for about 20 to 30 minutes. And when I'm cutting their hair, they just open up and we just talk casually. So that's been a great thing.
Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. And it's kind of a cool peek into, little piece of somebody's life, so like an intimate conversation that you wouldn't typically get to be a fly on the wall for it.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that a lot. I
Check
like it a
that one
lot.
out. That's fun. That's been
Right.
fun.
We'll make sure everyone has links to it so they can check it out because it's
Yeah.
nice, short conversations. Like you said, interesting. It doesn't take up a ton of your day, and like I said, I enjoyed it when I checked it out. So thank you
Yeah.
very much for sharing with me.
Awesome.
So you now live in Florida, correct?
Yes.
So how do you like Florida compared to living up in the Northeast?
Well, I'm definitely saving money. I'll tell you that.
Hell, for a minute here, it feels like we're getting closer and closer to their cost of living.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, cost of living definitely has gone up, but the state income tax is great. We saved about, I don't know, 30,000 dollars. I was paying like $25,000 in property taxes alone in New Jersey.
Jesus. Isn't that
So
crazy? When
Yeah,
you think about it, I mean, just on the surface of it, like
I
it's
got
insane.
I got three kids, and anything I could save for their future is better.
No
So,
doubt.
and the school system here in Boca is great, just as comparable as where we were, and we're paying a fraction of the price in taxes, and could put more towards their college savings, with that. Plus, we have better weather, and
Mhm.
we're active all year, so that's a good thing, and we're close to the beach, so there's more activities. So all in all, it's been great.
So let me ask you this. If and I know you said the weather's better, which I'm never going to disagree about that. I've got sand in my shoes and I'm very happy when it's 80 degrees and above.
Yeah.
But when you like, if the money part of it would not have been like a deciding factor, because that was home and because that was where you were from, would you have stayed there? Would you have thought twice? Would you have ever considered moving if it wouldn't have been for the money part of it, or was it always the plan to try to get somewhere warmer?
It was always the plan, and it kind of went
Okay.
full circle for me when COVID hit because they shut our business down, the barber shop, for like 90 days.
Yes.
So my oldest was just gonna start sixth grade that year, so it made perfect sense to move them at that point because I would not want to move her any later than that.
Hmm.
So and my investments have matured in that time, and I've put 20 years in, and everything just came full circle at that point. So.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, the weather, everything just came full circle at that. So
Now we've got it's crazy. I've lived in Florida. I've been a lifelong resident, but in the last 5 years, I guess it's been now, like when you look at all of the people who came because of COVID really did kind of spark that move, but it really has been, I think, it wasn't something to where people came here for a minute and then once things went back to normal, they kind of came, they filtered back out. I think the secret got out. People love it down here, and I think most people who came are here to stay.
yeah, I think COVID was the rude awakening. Yeah.
I'll
It-
be
it-
interested. I'm always curious. Like all these states that seem like I would think they'd be losing money hand over fist with everyone moving out of them.
Mhm.
I'm curious. At some point, do you see states like New Jersey, California, Illinois, some of these places? Do you see them start to roll back some of these taxes or some of these heavy blows that they put on their citizens to live there?
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if they try to make it more attractive for people to stay or come back.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes the hurdle bigger. They lost a lot of wealth. When I'm coming here, just seeing all the people, a lot of business owners come down here.
Hmm.
A lot of wealth is migrating south. So, unless something really happens up north that they got to start doing that, I don't see anything in the short term. But it definitely is very hard for an investor to to have properties and manage them up there because they're tenant favored laws.
Yes.
And for the expense to operate and manage them are very high. So you definitely have some hurdles, if you're investing in that environment.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, it just seems to me like especially now in today's world, it's incredibly unattractive to be
Mhm.
to be there. And I don't see, I mean, 10 years from now, if everything stays the same, I don't see why people would stay there. I mean,
Mhm.
it's unless you just have to, or unless it's just, or, I mean, I do know people who actually love living in New Jersey, believe it or not. But I mean, it's just not, I mean, there's a lot, like anyone who's migrated down here, they're not looking to go back. So I
Yeah.
mean, at some point, I just think they have to be flexible and change in order to stay semi-attractive for people to want to be there, to desire to be there. And then you have, I think about even like New York City or places like a Chicago or some of these huge urban centers where people have historically they've gone because they have more business opportunities, they have an opportunity to quote unquote make it. But the truth of the matter is that I feel like you could do that from anywhere in today's world. You don't have
Hmm.
to be in any single location to find success when it comes to the stock market or when it comes to some of these other reasons why people would have moved. The textile industries, any of the retail, any of that stuff. I mean, it's global at this point. You don't have to be
Absolutely.
anywhere.
I'm a good example of being a virtual landlord.
There you go.
I manage all my properties out of state and it's all done by phone. Um, a lot of it is systematic. You know, I have boots on the ground for, repairs, clean outs. If there's tenant turnover, I have a process for that. So, I mean, with technology now, it's really amazing. Tenants can Zelle you now. They could Venmo you now. Sending a check is like old school,
Right.
where in the past it was you had to wait a week to get your check or whatever. Now you can get it instantaneously through a Zelle payment or Venmo and with security cameras outside your properties, you can see everything on your phone. So it's pretty amazing. Technology is awesome.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. Do you feel like as far as, and I know this is kind of a left turn here, but like technology wise, like I know you're mentioning some of the payment platforms that you used and like security cameras. Like as far as is there any type of software within your industry, within the real estate industry that you feel like has been a game changer, whether it's to find new properties or it's to help manage your properties? Like is there one piece of technology that you would point at where it really has, where you're like, that changed my life, that allowed me to be a lot more, have a lot more freedom?
Yeah, so I would say this one platform that changed the game for me is called PropStream,
Yes.
PROP Stream. Are you familiar with that platform?
I am not. Please share.
Absolutely amazing platform. You could look up any property in the United States and figure out if it's a pre-foreclosure. You could figure out the ownership of the property. You could figure out the equity. You could figure out the value. There is so much information on PropStream. It's unbelievable. So that has never been available until like a couple years. I think like 5 years now. But
Okay.
prior to that, it's like flying blind. So this software, you can look up anything you want, single family land, a little bit multifamily, but it's not like commercial. It's more for residential. So I could give you a link to that. That's a very good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you get some sort of residual off of referrals.
Hmm. Yeah. Um,
No, I think that's fantastic. And like you said, I mean, I think about every industry has really like I believe like I used to say it about different things within the financial world. Like the iPhone to me was one of those things that changed life as we know it, because like you said, everything, you can do everything from the palm of your hand, but it was also so intuitive. Like
yep.
if you hand anybody an iPhone, they can figure out how to use it within a couple of minutes.
Hmm.
And so like I've always said, like anybody who that can do that in their industry, if you can make your piece of software or whatever you're offering to your clients, if you can make it the iPhone of your industry, if you can make it easy, intuitive, and just people pick it up, like it, and want to use it, that's like you said, it's a game changer. That's a huge win for you and for the people who are utilizing it. So I think that's
Absolutely.
fantastic. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah. Definitely utilize technology. You got to definitely leverage that because
No doubt.
it could really speed up whatever you're trying to do, whether investing or learning something. The technology now is amazing.
100%. Dennis, I've really enjoyed this conversation. If there is there anything that you would leave my guests with, something that you'd like them to know about you, if they're interested in getting in touch with you, if they'd like to learn more about, kind of what you do, we'll make sure they have links to your podcast. But then, if they'd like to learn more on the real estate side, or if they're interested in maybe doing something together, or I know I get people all the time that have whether it's investments or opportunities. Like, is there somewhere you'd point them to just to get to know you a little better?
Yeah, so I'm really big on coaching, especially having like a mentor by your side if you're just starting or if you want to take your, investing to the next level. So I started a little mentorship. You can see me on my website. It's called www.dennissellfl.com, DENNIS, Sell, S as in Sam, ELL, FL, like Florida.com. And you could see me there. You could check out my website. And if you're interested in any kind of mentorship, it's all there.
It's fantastic. I think that, I think that's a huge part. If I could reiterate this for my audience, if you're looking to get into investing in real estate and you haven't done it before, or it's something that's fairly new to you, like someone who's offering coaching, someone who is offering to, to help be a mentor in that, it's worth its weight in gold, because
Absolutely.
you don't want to, you don't want to step in it. You don't want to make huge mistakes, especially up front, because you're taking a leap of faith in a way. You're investing a lot of what your disposable income is or what you have saved. So if there's opportunities to gain some knowledge, to gain some coaching and some mentorship, take advantage of it.
Absolutely. It'll save you years of, just time. And like those little nuances I told you when I first bought my property, I wish I had a mentor to help steer me out of that.
Sure.
But I guess that was something I had to go through. But definitely if I had a mentor to steer me away from that, I would have so much more. But you have to learn what you have to learn, right?
That's right. You gotta get the education somehow. So, but if you can get less bruises doing so, I think it's better. But
Exactly.
the bruises create memories as well.
Any top,
They're hard
any
to
top,
forget.
any top athlete has a coach,
That's true.
right? It'd be weird if they didn't, wouldn't it?
Well, and I think that like a lot of it's thrown at you early in life, so people look at it as part of it. Like they look at it as saying, if you're going to be in athletics, you get a coach. Like
Yeah,
it's almost automatic. But
exactly.
when you're talking about investing or even your career or any of that stuff, you have to seek out a coach for the most
That's
part. No
right.
one's no one's running to you saying, "Hey, I'd love to be your mentor. I'd love to be your coach." It's something that you have to see. You have to learn that there is value there for yourself, and you have to seek it out.
Exactly.
So I think this has been fantastic, Dennis. I really
Cool.
appreciate you making the time to talk to me. I'll make sure that my audience has links to your website, to your podcast.
Thank you.
It's a fantastic listen. It's about, like you said, 20, 30 minutes long, easy to listen to on your way to or from work, or watch it at home since it is on video as well. And Dennis, again, thank you so much for being a guest, and we look forward to catching you down the road.
Thank you for having me and keep doing what you're doing.